Okay, I think we are live. Awesome. Guys, I'm going to start off today's session. We're going to be talking about stretching for sciatica. Should you do it? And I've got a question that I saw on one of the YouTube videos. And I wanted to read that out and then address this topic to help you guys, because so many of you are going to be thinking the same sort of thing when it comes to your sciatica. There is differing information out there, and if we can start to understand why one individual might be talking about having that sort of avoidance of doing these kind of stretches and someone else might feel to the contrary, we can start to navigate how we should move forwards. And it's all about basically the philosophy with which someone is coming to the problem of sciatica. So the comment here was, I'm getting so confused with so many different opinions for my sciatica. I was told in another video to never stretch the hamstrings, which is the worst stretch for sciatic pain. Is this not true then? And one of the most important things to understand is, why are people being given flossing? And the idea is that if you get into the position, right, you're sitting here, and because in order to do flossing, what we're trying to do is we have to get the nerve on tension. And when we think about the sciatic nerve, we think about the nerve that runs all the way around here, all the way up through the spinal cord to the brainstem. And so we need to create the longest possible pathway through the human body in order to effectively deliver the stretch. And so we do that by completely rounding the lumbar spine, rounding the thoracic spine, and tucking our chin towards our chest. We then lengthen this route by straightening the leg. Now, what we do is with that foot, we dorsiflex, point our toes towards the sky. That creates the longest possible route for that chain of nerves. We can do this similarly in the upper body with our brachial plexus by cocking our wrist, fully extending our elbow, extending our shoulder back like so, and turning in the opposite direction. We can do the same kind of thing, because the nerve is built to run the longest duration through the body, or the longest route through the body. Nerves don't stretch like muscles do, right? My hamstring has a lot of play in it when I do this. Your bicep has a lot of play in length of the muscle. Nerves do not stretch in that way. Yes, they move and they slide through in certain ways, but they do not stretch. So once we create that longest route, then all of a sudden, we can then start to tension that nerve by doing the nodding and all that kind of stuff. But what are we doing here? We are creating a tremendous amount of flexion and forward bending through the lumbar spine. And so to posit why you might get relief in this scenario, the reason you might get relief in this scenario is exactly the same, in my opinion, as the child's pose or knee hug, right? You've got an injury, a herniated disc, something like that in the lower lumbar spine, which is irritating the roots of the sciatic nerve. There's inflammation around here. And so when you get into that position that I just mentioned, you are fully bending forwards, opening out these holes, and that feels nice. That's really important, right? And guys, I'm going to go through some of the questions so I can see nobody's posted here, and I'm going to go through those in a moment, okay? But it feels nice, okay? That's why. And that's a problem, because what we're doing is making the problem worse, but I'll get back to that in a moment. And so that's why sciatica flossing might well feel nice for you. Now, when it comes to the hamstring stretch component versus the sciatic nerve, you can't recommend flossing and then say hamstring stretching is bad, because a hamstring stretch is fundamentally part of the position that you get into to floss the nerve. And so that's a really, really important distinction. All I'm doing when I do this is straightening my leg. If I stand up and go from bent leg to straightened leg, am I getting pain? No. But when I do my static flossing or I'm a hamstring stretch, I get pain. Why is that, right? Because if I go from this position to here, the nerve or whatever it is has moved to the same degree as when I'm doing it sat down. The big difference is when I'm sat down, I'm squashing through my disc, I'm flexing my lumbar spine, and then because I do have a degree of stiffness in the hamstrings, as I do that and straighten that leg, my lower back starts to round. That starts to strain down on the disc and I get pain. It's nothing to do with the nerve. Although, well, it is partially to do with the nerve. The nerve is then being irritated as a result of the pain, as aggravating the root cause problem. But this is where, if you focus instead on the actual root cause of your sciatica, if you focus on this little injury down here, the herniated disc that is there, that is bulging out and creating a lot of inflammation in a confined space, you realize that certain positions, certain strategies, certain options are addressing the symptoms, or trying to, and considering the underlying problem. And certain strategies that you'll see online are trying to address the symptoms, but completely disregarding the problem. So the example of the knee hug, the example of the sciatic flossing, is there to try and provide symptomatic relief, but completely ignoring the underlying problem. And this is the big issue with sciatica and with back pain, is that unlike having a meniscus injury or a ligament injury to my knee, whenever we do that, we don't do knee pain rehab. We do knee injury rehab. Whenever we have shoulder pain, we don't do shoulder pain rehab. We do supraspinatus tendon rehab. But when we have back pain or sciatica, we do sciatica rehab, we do back pain rehab, and it's because we're focusing on the pain, and that is the big mistake. If instead we, like every other area of the body, focus on the injured tissues in the lumbar spine, then we start to realize that that disc bulge, for example, down here, used to look like this. And then through repetitive strain, we started to get the nucleus, which is the bit in the middle here, to break through those back layers. And that process of tissue damage results in inflammation. And maybe it progresses on to this particular point here where it's going all the way out the back. But that creates inflammation. That is tissue damage. That is then going to fill this space. And that's going to irritate this nerve. And where's this nerve? It's right down here at the bottom. Oh, that's one of the roots of the sciatic nerve. And then we get our symptoms down the leg. And one of the symptoms that we might notice, either directly or in a kind of a second order manner, is that those nerves also control your hamstrings. So is it unreasonable to suggest that your hamstrings might be tight? And so when you go in the seated position to straighten that leg to do the hamstring stretch, because the hamstrings are in a state of spasm, because they're getting signals from the injury down here, as soon as you start to straighten the leg, it pulls the lumbar spine, right? It shouldn't do that. But at some point when the hamstring can go no further, movement starts to leak into the lumbar spine. And that is where we then compress down on the front part of these vertebrae. We drive through the front here and then sends strain through the posterior parts of the fiber, aggravating and irritating the underlying problem. That is why, we find such conflicting advice. A lot of the stuff on Instagram, a lot of the stuff on social media is geared up because it requires a conversation, right? To explain all of these things. Whereas if I just say, do this funny little stretching in 13 and a half seconds, you're going to all of a sudden have sciatica relief. That sounds fun. That sounds like a very good reward for time invested, right? That fixes all my problems in 13 seconds. Wow, that's magic. It's like, no, you've got an injury. It's not going to be fixed in 13 minutes or even 13 days because tissue healing takes time. Those of you guys that joined me earlier this week, my little finger's healing, but it's not healed. And that's soft tissue. That's got a lot of blood supply to it. That's going to heal really fast. And I can take that out of the equation and it's not going to be strained every day, although I might knock it at jiu-jitsu tonight, right? But my spine, that's under strain every single day. So it takes time to heal. Very important point. Question. I'll come back to that if there are any particular questions on that topic. I'll have a look through the TikTok comments in one moment, actually. In fact, I'll do that now. See where we're at. I need to figure out if there's a way for me to filter just comments. What have we got? What have we got? What have we got? Okay, we're at the start. I'm bedbound with lower back injury. 2 physios have told me 2 different things. It's feeling awful. It's tough. It is tough. Often they're not necessarily saying too much in the way of difference, right? Someone might say you've got a disc bulge. Someone else might say you've got stenosis. The reality is they're just not realizing that with a disc bulge you get stenosis, so it's the same thing. Now, you might be getting people sort of talking about piriformis syndrome. You might be getting people talking about sciatica. You might be getting people talking about muscle spasm. Those are all parts of a back injury. And so what you've probably got, Shauna, is that people are talking about different parts of the same problem, but they're not talking about the common origin, the common injury. The most important thing you can do, no matter how bad we are, is get started on our rehab work. Is this nerve flossing blue? Yes, we were talking about nerve flossing, sciatic nerve flossing. I think fundamentally it's a waste of time. On the one hand, we're saying there's this very, very delicate nerve that's being touched, right? And it's causing all of your pain. And then on the other hand, we're saying what's a really good idea? It's just like floss it through really hard. Obviously, it's not really hard, but floss it through because that's going to help what precisely? The nerve is trapped by something. Focus on the something. Stop focusing on the trapped nerve, right? And fundamentally, for most of you, as so frequently you find, you have the MRI and they say there's a disc bulge there, but it's not pressing on the nerve. We don't know what to do. That's very, very common. A lot of you guys post, you say, oh yeah, my disc isn't pressing on the nerve. So they said they didn't know what's going on, or it's not the cause of my pain. Going through it, my hamstrings are so painfully tight and I have low back pain, cannot seem to fix it. You have to focus S* on the back injury. The back injury is there. It is very common because so you guys coming on TikTok, like we've been doing this for a little while now, and more or less everybody here, YouTube, and members of the program, patients that have come in, most of your back pain is coming from here and here, right? The L45, that's this green one and this green one, and the L5S1, the green to the orange, right? That's the segments of your spine that are most of you injured as the primary root cause of the pain that you experience, the dysfunction you experience, the back pain, the buttock pain, the sciatica, the symptoms down the leg, the numbness in the big toe. And so that is where the issue is. And it is very, very reasonable for a lot of you guys to get dysfunction, pain, stiffness, tightness, whatever, muscle spasm, cramps in the muscles that are controlled by that section of the spine. We talk a lot about sensory, the pain, the burning, the numbness, the tingling, but also understand that those same little nerves in here, they carry motor control. They control the muscles, right? They generate power, the functioning of the muscular tissue. The brain goes and sends a signal through those nerves to tell the muscles what to do or not do, right? And so the buttocks muscles, the hamstring muscles, the calf muscles, all of these have the propensity to be dysfunctional in some way, not work properly in some way. And often that dysfunction serves to make the problem worse, right? It's not helpful because, and it's a double whammy, right? Because the hamstrings are tight, because the hamstrings get stiffened up because the lower back is hurting. The lower back is sending signals to the hamstrings to tell them to tighten up. Now the hamstrings aren't moving correctly, so that pulls pelvis round into this direction, this posterior tuck, or at least limits the amount of movement that you can go through. And that then means the lower back gets involved sooner and therefore gets put in precarious positions sooner. And it becomes a very vicious cycle, which is very difficult to break sometimes, unless you understand that, and then you can start moving forwards. More comments coming on TikTok. Weight loss helps a lot. It will certainly be helpful, especially if you're up at 16 stone, coming down to 13. That's good. That's very good. I have an L5S1 disc, I'm assuming, for a year now. Denzel, get some help with that, right? We've got plenty of resources. If you're struggling, and if you've been struggling for years or a year or 6 months, go up to the link up here on the TikTok and check out the profile page. There's a link there and more explanation, more help, more support, structure that you can follow. What else have we got here? Herniated disc is on the left, but the nastiest sciatica I have is down my right leg. These things happen. It's not uncommon. It can switch sides as well. Those things do happen. I've got motor weakness in my foot, John Doe. My wife has had exactly that, had an MRI to confirm the severe bulge was not being treated as urgent. It's good, right? Most back pain is not medically urgent. It is not an emergency. It is very rare that it actually is, which is great. That doesn't mean we don't deal with it. It just means that, there's not something urgent that needs to be done from an operational point of view. Coming over to Nobu. So I prefer to lie on my back during the day for prolonged periods with my knees bent. Is it okay if I use the towel in my lower back under my head when doing this? I think you're focusing perhaps on the wrong thing. You need to focus on the rehab work, right? Yes, you're getting yourself into certain positions. I think lying on your back with your knees bent is generally going to involve rounding and flattening your lumbar spine to the ground. And that's not necessarily going to be ideal. Having the towel underneath the lower back is obviously going to be a better option. The towel decompression stretch is one of the stretches we talk about. Putting a rolled up towel underneath this lumbar spine does a number of things. Number one, it takes the muscles and the ligaments off tension. Most of you guys spend all of your day over like this, putting tension through these ligaments and muscles. Number two is that when you're in that position, lying over the towel, it actually creates this decompression effect through the discs, which is what we want, because what you guys have at the root cause of your problem is a compression on the segment of the spine, and that compression has been to such an extent that it has resulted in the failure of the disc, and now we've got this kind of problem here. Guys, you guys are throwing a lot of comments in the chat, so I'm going to come back through these. Gemma said I can only sleep on my side. One of the best positions we generally suggest to try and sleep on is going to be side lying. Ladies, if you've got a larger pelvis and a smaller waist, your pelvis sometimes rocks one way or another, and that means the spine will bend to one side or another, and that can sometimes be uncomfortable. You can put a small towel or a small cushion in the side to square your spine off, and obviously a pillow between the knees can help. But you want ideally your spine to be on its side level. If it's bending one way or another, that's going to be uncomfortable. Ladies, you tend to suffer that more, and so you might find a softer mattress might be a little bit more comfortable, and you struggle particularly on a harder mattress. Guys, it's not quite as pronounced, but still that same comment can be relevant. And obviously remember the shoulders at the other end, right? If the shoulders are quite broad, then we're going to bend from the top down, and that can have an effect on the degree of comfort or discomfort that you're experiencing whilst you are lying down in bed. JFX has said, I have pain in those blue discs on your, in the thoracic spine. One of the biggest things, like the most practical and simple things you can do is just working to be more upright, right? It's a lot of slouching over like this on phones, puts compression through the thoracic spine, boom, through here, especially if it's this region of the thoracic spine as well. What else have we got? I have spinal stenosis, a trapped nerve. All my skin feels like it's burning. Guys, sometimes people get confused, right? They say, oh, well, John, the specialist over here, said that I had a slipped or bulging disc, right? And someone else said I had stenosis, and they've given me different exercises. We even had someone say on one of the comments, they said, should I be doing different exercises for my stenosis versus my bulging disc? And it's like, the bulging disc will cause the stenosis, right? because you get stenosis in 3 areas, right? One in the middle here, and then either side, the hole here and the hole here. All the stenosis fundamentally means is that a hole is smaller than it otherwise should be. It's narrowed. And do you know what does that a lot? A disc bulge. That hole is narrowed compared to that side. So if you have a disc bulge, you're going to have stenosis. Like, it's part of the course. And just because someone talks about the stenosis and someone talks about the disc bulge, all you've got there is someone talking about the cause and someone else talking about, you know, a byproduct, right? The disc bulge leads to stenosis, right? In the moment that you get the disc bulge, you now have stenosis. So something to bear in mind there, and sometimes it confuses a lot of people. Guys, those of you that are newer in the chat, if you have any questions, post down in the comments. We'll go through those during Q&A on this kind of stuff, back pain, sciatica. Try and keep it with reference to the lower back to keep it focused. I currently have a frozen lower back. I have hypermobile joints. I cannot straighten up. It is very common for people to be stuck. You know, you're sat in the chair and then you got to get out and you, oh, I'm stuck, I can't straighten up. And then you have to go like so. Why is that happening? Well, number one, some of you are in the unfortunate position where sitting actually feels good. And the reason that sitting feels good but is bad is because when you sit, you just enlarge the spaces where the nerves come out. So when I get into the seated position, these holes get larger. When I get into the standing position, they go back to their normal size, or try to. Now, if you've been sat down for a long period of time, they've filled up with inflammation because you have an active injury there. And when you suddenly go with the hole, it doesn't deal with that. It compresses the tissues that are in there, i.e. the nerve, and you literally get stuck trying to straighten up, and you can't because there's a lot of inflammation. Most of the time, beyond the initial actual injury, and maybe the micro aggravations, let's say, that happen on a daily basis, the pain that you're experiencing, the dysfunction when you turn one way or another, is often going to be the changing sizes of those holes that squeezes on the nerve. And it's not the hole squeezing on the nerve, it's just a bunch of inflammation in there, maybe a bit of disc as well. And that just creates more pressure, right? It's like, imagine you're in a lift that only takes 7 people, and then every so often, another person gets shoved in. Everyone goes, ouch, 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 right? That's what's happening in that lower back because there's too much inflammation there. You need to get a couple of people out the lift, or out the elevator, sorry. And that's why bending forwards feels nice, right? Because it enlarges the boundaries of the elevator in that analogy, okay? And that's not ideal in the lumbar spine because it comes at a cost. The cost is that you're squashing down on the front of this vertebra. For the disc to function effectively, you have, or the way in which the disc functions, let's say, you have the nucleus in the middle. You have the annulus fibrosus, which is layers of ligament that run around here. They are the thing that fundamentally are bearing the load because when you squash down perpendicularly, the fluid here tries to escape in all directions. In the intact disc, as you bend forwards, it squashes down on the front and more pressure goes backwards and on these posterior fibers, and they deal with it fine, right? You get up, you go over here, you bend down, squash down on the front, not a problem, right? They're intact. They can deal with that kind of load because they're healthy, okay? But in the presence of the injured disc, we've now got fewer layers on this side, on this quadrant here. There's fewer layers that are intact, fewer layers that are healthy, right? And so when I bend forwards, if I'm just weak enough, that starts to strain those a little bit more, creates a little bit more of a problem. And that's something we don't want to do. So in the pursuit of trying to make this hole where the nerves come out larger, I have to make the underlying problem worse. That's why, you know, bear in mind, of the thousands and thousands of patients that come to see us in clinic and members that have seen us through the program, more or less everyone is doing things like knee hugs, child's pose, forward bend, rocking the knees left and right before they join the program. You stop them doing those things, you start focusing on stabilizing the spine, learning how to control the spine, bending with the hips through movements like the squats and the hip hinges, the dead bugs, for example, as well, to develop core control. You start to do an awful lot better. Not least of all, because you stop making the problem worse 15 times a day. Because you go to the physio and say, oh, do these exercises, hug your knees and do that. And oh, how often should I do that, doc? Oh, you should just do it as much as you can. It'll feel nice. And you're going nowhere. You're going nowhere. Whereas we can set objective markers and objective targets when it comes to doing the squats and doing the hip hinges and doing the other load-bearing exercises that we're talking about, and actually get measurable improvement in the resilience and health of our lumbar spine, which answers that all too familiar question of how do I know when my disc is healed? How do I know when my back injury is healed? And when does healing stop and strengthening start? Well, it's all one long continuous process. And so the best way to understand that is to be doing strengthening exercises from the outset, of course, adjusted to your current level of skill and competence, and seeing the progress happening over time. Black Feathers has said, I lay on my back with a pillow under my knees a lot too. It helps relieve the pain. This is unfortunately just like one of those exercises, like the knee hugs and child's pose. When you lie on your back with your knees up, you are flattening the lumbar spine. It opens these holes out, which is why it feels good. Plus you've got a decompressive load. It's not quite as bad as I feel like a more forced knee hug, but it's not ideal. You know, focusing on something like a towel decompression, but also making sure like you guys cannot get stuck. One of the biggest mistakes that people used to make, you know, in the program before we had this significant overhaul back in September, is that they would stay on the relief-based stuff for too long. Even if you're doing relief-based stuff like the towel decompression that's good, you have to do strengthening work. Even if you're doing the towel decompression or you're doing your contrast bathing or you're doing some of your smart stretching and it's helping, you have to do strengthening work. That's what gets you better. This lying on the floor, even though it's maybe all right, maybe comfortable, maybe not necessarily that bad, it's not getting you better. It's not rebuilding strength and stability. In fact, if you're doing it too much, it's probably doing the opposite. The less you do, the less you can do. So the more vulnerable you become. So the less of a challenge overwhelms your lower back, so you have a flare-up. So you do even less. So you become even weaker. So you continue down this spiral of getting worse and worse and worse. And you get to the point where you go and pick up a water bottle and you're like, oh, my back went again. Because we haven't done any strengthening work. It's very, very important that we understand this. That's why we take so much time to do these kind of chats and podcasts and things like that. Thank you, Black Feathers. I find your approach very helpful, better than my physio. It's just the depth with which you're looking at things. I had a very interesting instance. I was talking to someone, a family member the other day, about them doing some physio. And it's not the physio individual's fault. They went in there, right? And I know this individual, and they're doing stuff literally on the day of the appointment. And then they go into the appointment, and they're like, oh, we're going to do some strength training or something like that. And they're doing all this stuff, messing around. It's like, you're just following protocols. It could have been, you know, a robot, quite frankly, giving the advice, because you've got a patient in front of you who is capable of so much more, and you're giving them stuff that fundamentally is doing absolutely nothing other than wasting time. And they got back and it was more of a social, because I saw some of the other people that I knew, rather than actually rehab, right? And that's because the individual practitioner in those environments is heavily constrained by what they can do. And they don't have the freedom to think laterally, lest they be punished significantly. So yeah, something to think about anyway, with regards to that. It's not their fault, Black Feathers, but they're limited in what they can do. I imagine it's the NHS physio that you're seeing. I have a protruding disc on my L4-5. It hurts a lot when I sit for too long or stand. It's a load-bearing structure. Lauren, you have a load-bearing structure that's injured, right? It's going to hurt when you load bear. You're going to have limitations on that. The important thing that we have, whether you guys are struggling with driving for more than 10 minutes, walking for more than 5, you know, maybe you can walk for 10 minutes, but 15 and a half minutes starts to become problematic. Maybe you're struggling sitting down at the desk for X period of time. Make a note of what that period of time is, and then progress with the rehab, and then look back and see how that duration changes. What happens, generally speaking, if you're going through these things correctly, you're doing your squats or your hip hinges, and you've gone from doing body weight squats holding onto your chair, right? You're doing like that, for example. Not a wheelie chair, because that wouldn't give you any support, right? But you're doing your squats, and then you progress on, and you're doing with 5 kilos. And then you progress on still, not over a few days, right? But over a little, and we're doing the same squats with a 36 kilo or 80 pound weight. And you then notice that, oh, I can walk for longer. And often you don't even notice that. You're out there walking with your friend or family member and they go, hey, Lauren, you're doing all right standing up. You haven't complained about your back once, and we've been walking for about 25 minutes, half an hour. Usually you would have complained about 15 times by now. Sounds like your back's doing better. And you go, oh, I guess it is. And often others will notice that first, but those things, all the symptoms that you guys have, the limitations that you have in your daily life, the things that drive you to be frustrated about your back pain, those get better as you progress through your rehab. I repeat, you progress through your rehab and then those things get better. Too many of you have the viewpoint that I need to wait for things to get better before I can do my rehab. You have to understand the one comes before the other, and too many people are putting the cart before the horse and not getting better because they're waiting for the symptoms to go away before they start rehab. We had a very good comment by one of the members, and I can't remember who it was, but it was today or yesterday. And they said they just started the program, and yeah, I had a flare up. They were like, I had a flare up last week, and I had to bend down to pick up a flat screen TV or something like that. And it's like, you're worried about doing strengthening exercises, but you had to put the flat screen TV, which was like 35 pounds, on the floor. We didn't think that was necessarily maybe a bit, those two beliefs are a bit incongruent. They're a bit in contradiction with one another. And like this happens all the time. There will be so many of you guys, if you just honestly took a step back and just evaluated, what do I do every day? And how many times in my daily life am I putting myself in vulnerable positions? And you're like, oh gosh, quite a few. And oh gosh, I pick up my toddler. And oh gosh, I put them in the car, but I'm worried about doing rehab. I can't hold those two competing beliefs. I need to get rid of one. You know, I can actually do the rehab. I need to actually do the rehab because much of what you're doing, the flare-ups come from your daily life activities. Granted, they might come from exercises done incorrectly as well. But most of the flare-ups, you know, drawing on experience here, most of the flare-ups that people have come from doing stuff out there in the real world, right? Rather than actually carefully controlled rehabilitation where you're 100% focused on what you're doing. So something to bear in mind as well. Very important. Back pain has gone. I have sciatica, so there's a storyteller. I have sciatica, which gets worse even when back extension isometric holds. Storyteller. I know you've commented on the lives a couple of times. I would suggest having a look at the program so you've got something more structured to actually follow along with. I'll put the link in the chat. For those of you guys on YouTube, go and have a look at that. I don't think holds are actually very good, and you might be making some mistakes. So education is important there, but I don't think holds. So you'll see guys talking about doing like a static hold and stuff like that. A hold is very difficult to. I suggest it's very difficult to have a degree of objectivity. When should I have stopped, right? I did a couple of weeks ago now, September 14th, I think it was, did a seminar, and we did some static plank hold, right? And it was like, at what point should I really be stopping here? At what point, you know, actually I'm just getting bored, right? Quite frankly, I'm getting bored. And maybe about 2 minutes and something. And then Sean, the guy doing the seminar, stop the clock. Said, yeah, everybody, that first person's gone down, you lost, everybody else will call it there, we'll be here all day. And it was very clear, like it's the kind of static holds, it's very difficult to get that arbitrary nature to allow you to log your progress over time, I would suggest. It's much easier with like sets and reps. And if you're just following along, we choose sets of 10 repetitions. Because once you start getting into 15, 16, 20 reps, then we start to get the issues. And if we're down at 5 reps, yes, that's very efficient for strength training, but that can have other issues when it comes to failure. So 10 reps is a nice point. I don't think there's any mileage in really doing isometric holds. I think it's just a little bit difficult to make it useful from a progressive rehabilitation point of view. Brad has said, I've got my technique down. Once I've got my technique down in phase 3 of the program, feeling strong, pain reduced, still bothersome, especially in the morning, what percentage of body weight should I be hip hinging? So Brad's going to be working through the discovery workouts to find the right load in phase 3. That's the task at hand, Brad, in phase 3 is for you to figure out what weight. So you'll see in those videos where I'm doing it, I got a couple of weights out and we're going through them live in the workout to figure it out. We've got really 3 targets, and I've simplified this in the last few weeks in which I talk about it because it just makes it a little bit easier for people to understand. But in terms of your body weight, when you are standing compared to when you are sitting, you are putting in the sitting position 20 to 45% more load through the spine of your body weight, roughly. And so considering that, for me, for example, 20% is around about the 20 kilo mark, 45% is around about the 45 kilo mark, roughly. And so those are the first 2 mileage points that we want to be aiming for on your hip hinge and or your squat as a demonstration of significant progress and good levels of strength and stability and load tolerance in the spine starting to become developed. And over time, a longer term target for most guys is going to be around about 100% body weight. So you can comfortably do 10 reps of body weight, your body weight on the bar. Most of the time it's going to be a bar by that point, on your squat and on your hip hinge. That is the kind of target that you want to aim for when you're doing your rehabilitation work. And that's, again, a long-term target. The shorter-term target would be the 20% figure and the 45% figure for you guys. So that's what I'd really be aiming for. And Brad, often you'll find that, well, not often, everybody, we don't get to choose which one of our symptoms go first. A lot of times it's the sensitivity, the flare-ups, they start to happen less and less and less. We feel less vulnerable. But particularly in the morning, that is often one of the things that can linger a little bit longer, because we're still doing little things. We still haven't built up the appropriate level of strength and stability. So we're still bothering ourselves a little bit. And for some people where they find that they get pain at night, as a result of their back pain, they wake up and like, oh gosh, they rolled over an hour, that hurt. You often find that what happens is as you progress through the rehabilitation work, as we build objective strength, objective load tolerance in the spine, it becomes safer and safer through the day. We find that we wake up later and later in the morning with pain, and then we find we wake up with a little bit of pain, and then that pain starts to get less and less and less, and Brad, over time, you're going to find it's just not there. But that's a function of more extended rehab. Unfortunately, what often happens is a significant amount of the symptoms settle down, and then we're left with the residual, and the residual is the stuff that takes longer to go. And that's maybe where you're starting to approach, Brad, perhaps. Hopefully that helps. Other questions we've got here. Butterfly says, I did hip hinges 2 days ago, but later I get stiffness in the neck and must lay flat. Have a look at how you're doing it. One of the big mistakes people make when they do hip hinges, and there's a reason for this, again, there's always a reason and an explanation for why certain things are good. Now, personally, I find it's much better to have a neutral spine throughout the entirety. So when you're doing a hip hinge, and arguably a squat as well, you imagine someone has stuck a rod going through your skull, all the way through your spine, so that it is fused. It cannot move. And so when we do our hip hinge, we're like so. Now, what often happens when you're taught these things, the one error that people make is that they round their lower back. So they go like that. Obviously a problem. So what you get taught is to look up. So what you then get, and we see this on videos, is people that have a neutral spine here and they're like that. You see what's happening to my neck? I'm thinking so hard about my lower back that I'm just jarring my neck over and over again. Or irritating perhaps. Right? There may be some pre-existing issues in the neck there that are why this is happening. And so focus on a neutral spine. The reason that you're told to look up is because it's trying to correct for an issue that you might make in the lower back. But what's better is you just focus on neutral spine throughout the entirety and don't make those mistakes. Once you're aware of why those things are happening, I think the use of overcorrection is perhaps a little bit, not misguided, but a little bit naive. We're making it too simple, right? And just having that more detailed explanation of, look, this is one of the tips we might make, is to look up, but actually if you just focus on holding a neutral spine, you're going to find it a lot better. So maybe take the weight down a little bit instead. Amy has said, is there anything I can do for lordosis in my spine? I have joint hypermobility too. Amy, you should have a lordosis in your spine. You should have a lordosis in your spine. I don't know if it was measured. It probably wasn't based on that comment there. Probably wasn't measured. But guys, you need to understand the spine is supposed to be lordotic. We are supposed to have a smooth backward bending curve through the lumbar spine. We frequently go through member x-rays demonstrating these things and measuring them. Most of the time, the comments for people like Amy will be, oh, someone stood up and go, oh, look, your bum sticks out and your tummy sticks out and you've got lordosis. It's like every human being should have lumbar lordosis. It's basically as useful as saying, Amy, you've got 2 legs. And it's like, cool, thanks for that, right? It's not a statement of any problem at all. Now, hypermobility is something that can be a disadvantage. So Amy might have some back pain. She might have a back injury. Lordosis is not the answer to that back injury. Lordosis is just a statement that you've got, a normally aligned lumbar spine. It probably wasn't done on any kind of imaging, so it's just been a throwaway comment, which basically may as well have not have been said. And quite frankly, it's probably more useful if it wasn't said, in all honesty. So what Amy probably means, what Amy means is probably what she was told. But what that individual probably means is they might be saying you've got a hyperlordosis, meaning that you have a beyond normal level of lordosis in the lumbar spine. Or they might have been meaning that you have a hypolordosis, meaning it's a flat back, but generally people would say flat back in that scenario to try and translate it to the layperson. So that's probably what's going on. And there are many people that comment with things like EDS and hypermobility issues. And often those are the ones that have hypermobility that are doing endless stretching because they feel stiff and tight all the time. And actually, you guys, there's a bit more challenge, right? Because there is this inherent instability there, but you're misreading tension as something that needs stretching for something that actually needs strengthening. So for those with hypermobility, I do believe that it can be, providing it's not to pathological levels, to the point where we're getting spontaneous joint dislocations happening all over the place, like your shoulders popping out, which is generally not most people that have this. They don't tend to have the most severe forms. But in your scenarios, actually building appropriate levels of strength, that hypermobility will be an asset for the long term because it means that your hips are going to be a bit more mobile, which means that strong hips with that good mobility are going to keep you really well for the long term. But weak hips with that excess mobility and a back injury can be very difficult to recover from. It's like you're walking around on a wobble board all the time. And no wonder why our back's getting flared up all the time. And then we feel tightness and stiffness as is driven from the lumbar spine, but we just want to do more and more stretching. And if we can break that cycle through understanding and appreciate that it's going to take a little bit of time, then we'll really do so much better for it long term. I do think the hypermobility, when it's said, it's generally a more minor version rather than some of the more severe, nasty pathological versions. I think it may well be a benefit in the long term. Pretty Eyes has said, can you help me? Guys, those of you that have been struggling, if you need a little bit more help, a little bit more support, do check out the link in the profile page, guys. Because that link up there in the profile page, there's a video there that explains a little bit more about the program, explains what we do, etc., etc. Have a watch of it, and if you like it, and if you like what we talk about here, and you want actual support, help, guidance, the full structured program, it explains all of that there, what's included. Check it out and consider joining. It really will help. Brad, you're too kind. I need to have a look at what... at how you're doing these and how I find them. But thank you, Brad. Brad, I said thanks for the mic after so many doctors, physios, methods, techniques, and systems, BIS, back in shape, has been the sole answer for my recovery. Eternally grateful. I don't know how you're doing that super chat, Brad, but thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. Burn It Down has said, I can do my body weight in deadlifts, but I still have sciatica. Is it okay to do hip hinges if I feel sciatica? A bit when I'm doing them. No, so this is a really good example. So it's very, very rare, very, 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 very rare that people are actually at the point where they're doing aggravation-free squats or hip hinges on their body weight. So me, for example, being 90 kilos, 92, 93 kilos, doing that weight. But if you're doing it and you're experiencing sciatica, you're not adhering to the two critical instructions with your rehab. Is that the rehab should always be aggravation-free, and it should be with correct choreography. And I'd suggest one or both of those are being violated in that scenario. And especially if we're experiencing pain while we're doing the exercise, we're doing something wrong in the moment. So back the weight off, find where you can do aggravation-free reps, and then build from there. Oscar said, I'm planning on a CrossFit course. Do you think that's a good idea for me with my back? I do not think it's a good idea for you with your back right now, Oscar. I would focus on building up to a better level. And then I'd suggest, I mean, it depends on how involved the CrossFit course is going to be, Oscar, of course, right? Hopefully it's going to teach them good stuff, but just remember some of the techniques that they're doing in the CrossFit environment are not going to be ideal, right? You think of things like the kipping, chin-ups, and all those kind of things, flicking your lower back through as you're doing those muscle-ups, and things like that. That's probably not going to be ideal. Not going to be ideal, especially considering the challenges with the dead bug, right? It's going to expose some of those areas. Academically, I think it would be valuable, and then you can bring in any questions that you've got as a result of that course into the space. And with the education that you've got within the program, Oscar specifically, that you'll have a new lens through which you can look at that information. To the degree you have to get involved in some of the actions, some of the practices, that might not be so ideal if we're still coming out of the back injury until we've built a bit more objective strength and resilience. Like the course I went to the other week, the seminar I went to the other week was about strength training, and you didn't have to lift heavy weights, right? So you could still benefit tremendously from the academic knowledge and all that kind of stuff without needing to lift heavy weights. You can play around with it on a lightweight, but that's probably what I'd say there. I think the continual professional development, Oscar, in your case, is always going to be helpful. It's just being mindful of some of the quirks of CrossFit, and especially the competitive application of CrossFit might be a bit difficult. Although seeing some of the videos in the members area, I think you'll take to that quite well as soon as you're feeling a little bit stronger maybe with that lumbar spine. What else have we got here? Let's have a look through, guys, you posted on TikTok here. And guys, I'm going to keep going. I've got another 20 minutes or so with you guys. So by all means, keep firing those questions in. We'll keep it going. So what have we got here? Back braces. Okay, I covered this the other session. I'm going to quickly talk. CrossFit finished me off, I'm assuming. Reminder, back braces. We covered this the other day because we had a very good question about one. When you are using a back brace, number one bit of information from the course that I went to the other week. A very strong guy who did 220 kilo squat live with us there, which was nice to see. He said, you earn the right to use a belt when you don't need it. All of you guys in the chat here now watching this do not need a belt. Because if you can't even control yourself on a daily basis without getting aggravation or doing the simplest of exercises, you haven't earned the right to use a belt. The belt is there as a competitive aid. Like you wouldn't dream of going and getting in the powerlifter's compression suit or putting straps on your wrist. So why are you using a belt? That's something to consider. Number one, or number two, following on from that, Most of you guys in the comments, and you can see they're coming in, right? We've only been doing these lives on TikTok for about a month, maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And we had like 4,000 comments because we got a notification on TikTok, which was cool. But bear in mind, like most of you guys have L4-5 and L5-S1 injuries. And so assuming you're a skeleton, the lowest you're going to get the belt is here, which means it doesn't even protect the section that we're talking about. So all it does is it feels cool when you put it on, right? Oh, it's tight. Oh, that feels tight. It must be good. It's creating pressure that's good, right? In my abdomen. It's not actually protecting the area that's at risk. And I touched on, I think that episode, I think it was either the last one or the one before, if you want to go back and watch it at the start. I touched on a few little bits of research that I pulled out, talking about the fact that it doesn't really limit any flexion. It doesn't stop flexion in a significant way on the squat or hip hinge. And so understand that is a tool for someone who's competing in the powerlifting environment. But too many times you'll walk around a gym and you'll see people, like you'll see some guy with a belt on, standing there in the mirror doing bicep curls. It's like, what are you doing wearing that belt? And then he'll go and put the weights down after like this, with a belt on. It's like, what are you doing? Like, it's so misguided. It's so misguided. And it's an example of seeing people at a high level using something and thinking, oh, I should use that too. Like, I never use the belt. There's no need to. And in that example I mentioned of the squat, if I use Sean as the example, like, he did all of that without a belt on. And then the belt would have been used, had he had one, to push the limit further for the pursuit of getting a new personal record on the lift, not for back health. The belt is not used for back health. But people think because it's support sounds like it's supporting me, so I use a support. And no, it's not a smart move. Some more comments on YouTube. I will try to not do the crazy stuff. Yeah, Oscar, please do, because I know it'll be helpful for you and hopefully helpful for many others. Yeah, Oscar, you're in the part where you're actually focusing on building strength and resilience back into that lumbar spine. So making sure you're going through some of those core phase 3 workouts to find the right level of resistance for your lumbar spine. That's the right challenge, specifically on the squat and hip hinge. And don't go too far off the beaten path with other bits and pieces. Really get that down first, and then you can go on and look at other bits and pieces, other exercises, and some of those new workout libraries that came out literally this week will be a nice addition to your weekly regime. How come I get sciatica when doing heavy pull downs? Probably because you're bending your back all over the place. You're doing this, right? You're going like that and you're like that kind of stuff, right? Seven burnt it down and said, I see a guy who just wears a belt when doing anything. Yeah, it's an accessory. It may well be a handbag, right? That's what it is. It's a handbag for him. That's all it is, right? Or it's like a new pair of trainers. You're not using it for anything other than showing other people that you've got a new belt. Like it really is. It's very like peacocking in the gym. I don't think it's particularly good. Not that you might want to call him out on it. It's not, he can do what he wants, but it is. It's not for anything useful. Camille said, do you have a program for DDD? Yes, the program, the Back in Shape program is for people with lower back injuries, which would include DDD, degenerative disc disease, although I don't like the last D. I think degenerative discs is all you need to say. Disease makes it sound like it's something different to what it is, right? It's a degenerative process within the discs, which is maybe recurrent injury, one could say. Bulges, herniations, all of that kind of stuff, right? That's what the program is for. Most members will have some degree of back pain, sciatica, buttock pain, discomfort, numbness, tingling, those kind of sensations when they join. But at their root, they all have a problem in this section of the lumbar spine where my fingers are, right? Maybe some have a little bit up here and maybe some other areas as well, but that's the main epicenter, if you will, of that lower back issue. Is pain centralization just in the injured disc area a good sign? Will that pain ease up too? So Mike has commented here, I'm assuming that the context here is something like sciatica. And so the process of centralization, whereby the symptoms that are in the leg start to recede back towards the spine, and then we're left with discomfort in the back, which can be sometimes even more unpleasant than the actual sciatica itself for some individuals. That is generally considered to be a good sign, generally. Other comments we've got here. Posture and stretches help me to decompress my spine and heal my disc. Awesome. Currently crippled 5 days after picking up my daughter's potty. Send help. Yeah, Rob, the stuff we talk about is going to be very helpful here. There are three parts of the way in which we approach this. You've got your relief work, which is stuff like the towel decompression, the bed decompression. Correct lower body stretching. You do not stretch your hamstrings like this, although most people do. You stretch it with a neutral spine, but you probably struggle to do that to start with, which is why you start the strengthening stuff simultaneously. Very important, simultaneously. But the core relief work, contrast bathing again over the lumbar spine to manage the inflammation in that lower back that's evidently flared up, quite significantly so. Then we've got the strengthening work. The strengthening work is the work that builds resilience, that gets you better, that makes you safer every single day from day one. And it's very clear that I imagine the potty was not particularly heavy. If we injured ourselves picking up our daughter's potty, or picking up a bottle of water, or putting our socks on, it's clear we did not have a healthy lumbar spine. We had a lumbar spine on the brink. And so that's an important point to start at, right? That realization. And then there's education that goes over the top of there. Rob and others that are struggling in this sort of scenario, check out the link in the profile page if you're on TikTok, or in the chat if you're in, or in the chat if you are on YouTube. Check out the link there, because that's going to give you the most structured support to get better. What else have we got here? No, things were not good to start with. I'll check the link. Awesome. Miss V, I also would like to know more about your chair, please. Yeah, so the chair. I think these are overpriced, if I'm honest with you. Guys, this is the basic version. It's normally like £500, but I think you can get it for about, I think we got it for about 300 and something. It was on sale. I think they're very good. I think you could get a high one, so one that comes up higher. It's the Hag chair. The nice thing about this is, number one, well, it's moving around, so you see me fidget all the time. One of the most important things, those of you that have to sit all day for work, one of the most important things you can do is fidget, because it constantly redistributes weight on the disc. Right? Notice it's sustained standing, sustained sitting, sustained X. That starts to make a lot of your back pain or sciatica worse. Right? And so when you're on a chair like this, you can move around quite a lot. It's quite comfy. It's got the saddle. Why is the saddle important? Because the saddle, my thighs are going away from me. If they're like this, then it puts more compression through my lumbar spine. We talk a lot about 40 to 90% more load through the lumbar spine when you're sitting versus standing. That 40 to 90 is dependent on how flexed your lumbar spine is, how much you're straining through those lower lumbar segments. So having the saddle structure, if this could go like a little bit higher, it would be even better, because then I really could perch like so. It's nice and comfy because you can kind of sit on the side like so. You can move around. If I'm leaning off to the side here, that's putting less strain through my lumbar spine. More of my body weight is coming through the back of the chair here. You can recline. And then my personal favorite, this is super, like if you have back pain, like right now, this is so comfy. Obviously you've got to be careful that you're going over the right leg, but this is like super comfy. Like even just like you put your arms on here and like this is so comfortable. I do not sell these, and I do think they're overpriced, but like at the end of the day, everyone's got different means. The more upholstered versions of these are around about like £1,500, which to me is like, it's a bit much, because it's not that good, right? But you know, hey, at the end of the day, if it works for you, it works for you. I think they are good. Go down a little bit. But hey, you know, if it makes your life significantly more like comfortable on a daily basis while you're at office doing stuff for 8 hours a day, maybe it's not overpriced for you. Something to think about anyway. What else we got? Elton that says, does eating anti-inflammatory food, losing upper body weight help with the disc bulge? Just eat real healthy food. I think people have gone overboard on this anti-inflammatory concept. Eat real healthy food. Inflammation is a good process. Out of control inflammation when it comes to chronic disease, okay, that's something different. But like eat normal healthy food. Make sure the primary focus on your eating is to provide your body with the stuff that it needs to heal. What are you trying to do with your rehab? Two things. Number one, support the healing process. Okay, what's damaged? It's not vitamins. It's not minerals, right? As much as those things are also helpful. It is collagen-derived tissue. It's ligamentous tissue that's injured. So you need to get protein on board in sufficient quantities to actually help provide the necessary stuff for healing. And then in the short to medium term as well, as the long term, we're building muscle tissue. So we need protein. Prioritize protein above all. And then, make sure you're eating whole, real, healthy foods. That does not mean you're living off protein shakes. That is not what we're saying. We're saying eat real, healthy foods. A food that you can name, right? It's a chicken. It's a broccoli. It's a salad. Salad's not the right one. It's a lettuce, right? It's a cucumber. Whatever it is, right? It's a piece of steak. It's a beef. It's a cow, right? That's what you should be eating, right? Real, healthy, real, whole food. And then if you're getting enough, then I think the first supplement to consider is going to be protein. I actually do think, to Oscar's question, do you recommend taking creatine? I take it every day. I take 5 grams every day. And I've only started doing that maybe in the last year, because it's just been bombarding my feed with just how good creatine is. And there's not really a vested interest there because it's not an expensive product. It's not a proprietary product. All sorts of companies sell it, but the benefits of creatine on a number of different levels for men and women it seems to be more and more stacking up, and it's been studied for so long that really, you'll see a lot of people talking about that, like that you just kind of can't ignore it. And I think it's worthwhile, Oscar, certainly. Just make sure you up your fluid intake as well. Some people apparently have a little bit of sort of gut intolerance to it. They're a little bit more sensitive to it, so they might need to spread the dosages over a longer period, but I just normally take, boom, 1 scoop in the water in here with some electrolytes, but I don't always take the electrolytes. I just drink well. So I think creatine is good. And if you want to take some other supplements, go ahead, but you've got to get the foundation of the pyramid right first, right? That means you're eating real food, and then maybe you can add some of those other things in. And don't try and lose weight. Don't try and lose weight through excessively restrictive calorie diets when you are struggling with back pain. You're trying to heal and regenerate. Restricting calories too much is not going to be a good time for you. I think it's unwise. I'm 30 with DDD, so makeup has said I'm 30 in DDD. L5S1, disc protrusion, have urgent neurosurgery appointment. I'm so scared. Don't be scared. Don't be scared, right? They're going to go through everything and talk you through it. If it's degenerative disc disease rather than a herniation, I'd suggest it's less likely to be something that will end up warranting surgery. And if injections are recommended, then there's a very good chance it's less severe, right? It's a very good chance it's less severe. Because if it was more severe, then they'd say, well, we need to do surgery, and always try your best to get a second opinion if that is the case. Irrespective of all of that, you're at home right now. You're not at the appointment. So it can't be that urgent, because when it is, you're already in there, and you're not on TikTok commenting unless you're in the waiting room right now. And so bearing in mind the stuff we talk about, in fact, in that scenario, send us a DM, because we have a very detailed podcast on surgery, and we'll send you a link to that. It's on the website. It's freely available. Just it's easier for us to get the link after the live to send you that link. Makeup, Miriam. What else have we got here? A few comments coming in on here. I am unable to load bear and walk through the left hip. Any ideas to improve mobility without crutches? You just have to start where you start, right? Like one of the simple, easy versions to start with. I'll just turn this around a little bit so you guys on TikTok can see me over here. Like the doorway squat. So this is one of the variations on the squat. You hold on to, I'll go on this one. You hold on to the, imagine I'm in a doorway, hold on to the door frame. Now I've taken some of my body weight off, and then I try a squat, right? You can see I'm not going very low, like hardly anything at all. You figure out what you can do and then build up from there. Everybody comes into the program, for example, at a different level of ability, a different level of strength, a different level of stability. And so the most important thing is you start where you start, right? If you're unable to low bear much through the left leg without crutches, then engage yourself. Some of the dead bug marching bridge exercises teach you how to engage the core. A lot of it might well be that you're actually, there's a lot of inflammation in the lower back and you're not managing it very well. So education is so important. And then maybe we do some of those variations. Maybe you're doing the core engagement on the floor or on the bed, sorry. If you're in the position where you can't get down onto the floor very easily, anything that's on the floor, I would do on the bed instead. And Lee, I'd have a look at the program. There's so much more there. It's not just about do this exercise or do that exercise. It's about education as well. We uploaded, well over 250 new videos to the program. It's all video based because, if a picture paints 1,000 words, a video is even more, right? Or a video is a novel or however the saying goes, right? It's all video based because showing, demonstrating, all that kind of stuff is really important. But also education is so vital, especially at this sort of time. Understanding, okay, I'm doing all these things that are making me worse every single day. And I can start changing some of those things. And that just calms everything down. Oh, and then I can stand up. I can't stand up for very long, but I can. And figuring out what you can do, right? It's fine to observe that you can't do this, that, and the other. But what can you do? People say, I can't do a squat. It's like, what do you mean by a squat? People say, well, I can't do a squat because a squat is this, right? I can't do that. I say, okay. At what point, if we use the knee bend as our measurement of a squat, right? 180 degrees, 170 degrees, 160 degrees, at what point in that is it becoming painful? Okay, if it becomes painful here, only go to here. Maybe you're holding on to your partner's hands. Maybe you're holding on to the crutches. We've had all sorts of members in all sorts of different positions start the program, but you have to start where you start. But something needs to be done because at the end of the day, Lee, you're still going to be getting up off toilet seat. As struggling as it may be, you're still going to be doing that. You're still going to be getting out of bed in the morning. You're at home, left to struggle for yourself. Learning how to move more effectively is going to be vital to your short, medium, and long-term success. What else have we got here? I've tried the same thing, Elton. I find these exercises help. Eating whole foods and no grains, fasting 17 hours a day made a difference. Yeah, fasting, interesting. I kind of accidentally do that most days. Do 3 sets of hip hinges with 10 hip hinges in each set. We typically, so Nomi, the program we typically talk about doing 5 sets of 10. Now there are variations on that, but 5 sets of 10 is typically what we're recommending and talking about. What else have we got here? Just looking through the comments on TikTok. Mattresses, a more firm one will help, Momo has said. Depends, if you're a lady and you lie on your side, a firm mattress can actually sometimes be a little bit worse. You need more cushions for support because of the waist. Oh, TikTok's just checking I'm a human. What was that? Do the 5 exercises you recommend, but get SIJ pain after the exercise. What am I doing wrong? I use the inversion too. Something would be the answer, Hennet. Something. One of the things that you need to do before you start the individual exercise, before you just start like the full workout, is looking specifically at each exercise. Some people need to go into more detail than others, right? Some people can breeze through and then it becomes difficult when they're adding load. Some people struggle to even do them at the start. Everybody has a different thing, but if you're struggling with pain, you need to drill down into the minutiae in more detail. So it's like, okay, we'll separate all of them. I'll just do the squat. Okay, does that give me any trouble? No. Okay. Oh, I got trouble later on in the day. Well, if you're only doing a basic bodyweight squat with barely any, without significant depth, look at everything else you're doing every day. This is why, like, some of you guys that are just doing some of the free stuff that we have out there and not benefiting from all of the education, you're kind of missing a significant piece of the puzzle, right? Because your exercise is maybe like half an hour, 20 minutes. What else are you doing for the 16.5 hours of the day that you're awake? Probably not good stuff, probably stuff that would be benefiting from education so that you stop inadvertently messing things up, right? So you finish your workout and you're feeling good, right? And then you just go plonk yourself down. What do you do afterwards? You do stuff, right? You live. You don't float there in suspended animation until you do your exercises next time. You maybe sat down, oh, I'll go and walk the dog. I was walking the dog and it pulled me off to go chase after a squirrel. Oh, what's that? That's got nothing to do with the exercises. That's completely unrelated, right? We had one of the members was in a minor RTA, a minor car accident last week. There's nothing to do with the exercises. It's not good, right? These things happen. The example earlier on about picking up the flat screen TV monitor, 35 pounds. Why are we not doing 35 pounds in the program? Well, I haven't got that far yet. Okay, well, that's a roll of the dice. It might bother you. Inversion tables, I think, are good. You've got to use them sensibly, though. If you are in the program, or even if you're not, we've got a video on the correct use of an inversion table. If you go to the trouble to invest in inversion tables, you want to get a good one, but you also want to use it correctly. Too many people use them in such a maybe a reckless manner because of the advertising of them. They're all advertised of people hanging upside down, doing sit-ups and all this kind of stuff. But actually, you need to use it a lot more conservatively than that. The phrase softness beats force. And being a little bit more conservative actually can help an awful lot more. Lisa said, I used to be flexible, not anymore. Will I ever get back my level of flexibility? Most likely, it's probably not unreasonable at all. I imagine a lot of that inflexibility is going to be, especially if we're talking about the hips specifically, is going to be maintained by the dysfunction and the injury that's there in the lower back, down here. It's sending signals out to these muscles that don't want to move. And you're focusing on flexibility rather than the underlying problem. That's the important part. What else we got? Should I squat and deadlift on separate days as I progress? Clint, yeah, if you're in the program, we typically suggest you start splitting those out, right? We do put it all together to start with, hip hinge and squat, but you'd separate that out over time, certainly. You're not going to be able to just, also bear in mind, like you're not going to be able to do, like long term, you're not going to be able to do max spinal loading one day after the next. You need to change things. Got a question about C3-4 disc protrusion. Guys, we're focusing on the lower back a little bit, but fundamentally everything we're talking about in the lower back is being repeated in the neck nowadays. People on their smartphones like so, all that kind of stuff. Try and preserve the lordosis. Send us a DM after this Minecraft word game and just say, hey Mike, can you send me a link to the Whiplash podcast? We'll get a link to that one. That'll be the best thing to watch. The neck cloud is good. We've also got a tutorial on the YouTube channel of the neck cloud. I think that's actually one of the few gimmicky devices that's actually really, really good. You've got to use it correctly though. So there's also a tutorial video on the YouTube channel, freely available, on how to use that neck cloud. Just type in neck cloud review and you'll find it. And as for BPC 157, I don't know enough about these peptides. I keep saying that over and over again. Maybe I should look into them. We've just been so busy with everything going on with the program and all that kind of stuff that I haven't had a chance to. But it looks like it's really good. The only thing I'd be careful of is there seems to be a lot of companies advertising a oral version, and my understanding of these peptides is that they are normally injectable versions, like that you might have with like insulin if you're a diabetic. And so I'm skeptical over the effectiveness of taking an oral version of this. I think it probably will be more like a marketing gimmick than anything else. So just be mindful of that, but they make sense, and looking into it further would be something I would suggest is worthwhile doing. Lorena, are step-ups equivalent to doing the stairs? Yes, so we discussed when we released like the core 5, it was an attempt to kind of come up with 5 exercises that everybody can and should do to help recover from back pain, right? And they all bring something different to the table. They all challenge you in a different way. But also one of the important considerations in this scenario was that you're doing these things every day anyway. So like you live in a house, you're going up steps. So the step up is designed to be something where you're actually focusing on the steps rather than just going up the steps carrying the laundry or thinking about going to bed or whatever it may be. You're load bearing through one limb and controlling your spine and not tilting the hips one way or another to irritate the lower back. You're creating more stability to that area. So that's one of the reasons that it's included. And it's a low step up, right? You can build up to a higher step up for sure, long term, but you don't need to worry about that until you've made a significant amount of progress. I don't really recommend any particular pillows per se. I don't recommend any particular pillows. I mean, a good one. If you sleep on the side, you want one that fills the gap between your shoulder or the gap that your shoulder creates. So you're not like that or the other way. And if you're on your back, you want something that supports the natural neck curve, not something that's propping you up like so. That's not going to be good. How long does the body take to stabilize the extrusion? And will the disc be strong again as it used to be? So very, very good question. And I'm probably going to get close to ending on that question, guys, because it's been a while. If you guys have any more questions, you can fire them in. I'll try and get through a couple of quick ones to finish up. And just before I go through that question, if you guys do need any more help, remember, you can always check out the link up the profile page. Watch the video there. That explains a little bit more about the program. It's not a long video. It's like 5 minutes. If that, it's probably about more like 3 to 4 minutes. And get started. If you've been struggling for a long period of time, just get started on the program. Cover the core phase 1 and the core relief strategy work straight away, and get involved in the group. We're there to help you. I really would recommend it if you've been struggling. You don't need to. It's actually a proper structured approach, and we're there to help you through that. So to the comment about will the disc be as strong as it used to be again, I would say for almost all of you guys watching this, unless you're a power lifter, leave the room, right? I think there is absolutely no reason to suggest that you cannot be, with the correct rehabilitation, stronger and fitter and healthier than you were before you injured your back. Irrespective of whether you've got a disc bulge, whether you've got a spondylolisthesis. We were talking about in a live stream with our members about the comment about NFL football players with spondylolisthesis continuing to play football and many other things, right? The individual that goes through the proper rehabilitation process is probably doing more in the way of strengthening work than they've ever done in their life, and more effectively because they've actually got guidance finally on making significant progress in the building of objective resilience in their lumbar spine to a degree that is significantly greater than what they had before they injured their back. I repeat, before they injured their back. So very, very important. Lorena said, I'm in your program and I'm doing squats and making a huge difference. I was using the stairs though. No, the stairs are fine. Lorena, for step-ups, just use the stairs. Yeah, what we often say is use your bottom step of your staircase when you're doing those. So please do. That's the right move. You've done it instinctively yourself anyway, which is great. Yeah, guys, like there is no reason you can't be stronger than you were before you injured your back. Really, there is no reason you can't be. So guys, I hope that's helpful. Spartacus, and to that topic, Spartacus has said, how long does an annular tear take to heal? That's the same question fundamentally as how long does it take a disc bulge, because a disc bulge is going to have tearing of the annulus because that's what it's bulged through, right? It really depends. You will see people in the comments that have been struggling with it for years, some that get over it in a relatively short period of time. The real question is, how long is it going to take you to stop making it worse and then go through a healing process? But in terms of adaptation to strain, change, remodeling of those tissues that are injured, muscles take weeks of stimulus to change. The discs take longer. You're talking about months to remodel under strain. Will it be able to form a scab and scar tissue and patch up to deal with relatively low levels of strain pretty quickly? Yes. Is my little finger healed? No. But is it painful anymore? No. That's where your disc will be. The only difference is you can't see that your disc isn't healed, right? But you feel, oh, it's not bothering me anymore. So you got to do stuff and then you re-injure it, right? It takes time. Are all the things possible? Yes, they are. But it's a case of you have to rebuild your resilience to allow you to do those things, right? And then you need to maybe make some things more sport specific. So guys, on TikTok, I will leave it there. I'm just gonna finish up on YouTube with you guys for a moment. We'll close off TikTok, guys. Thanks for joining. I'll probably be live tomorrow. If you're not in the program, check out the link up in the profile page. And thanks for joining, guys. I really appreciate all the questions on TikTok. YouTube. Let me just catch up with where we were here. Yeah, harsh thing, age is a factor in recovery for sure. But I'd say for every aspect of age, so for every component that age is a disadvantage for you in the recovery process, I think in a lot of cases it gives you an additional advantage. And what I mean by that is the younger person who's 20 will often have the impatience of youth getting in the way, the temptations of youth getting in the way. When they start to make progress, boom, they're off out doing other stuff. Whereas the wisdom of age will often mean that you are more consistent. And so there's that to bear in mind. I had a couple of other comments here. I'll just try and cover through those before we go. I have lower back pain, but I don't know how I can tell if it's SIJ pain or lower back pain. You can't, unless you're a pregnant lady, disregard the comment about SIJs. You can't move your SIJ. Like move your left SIJ. The only way you can move your left SIJ is through maximal flexion of the hip and then bending forwards, or the opposite direction, right? Then it will be moved as a consequence. SIJ is normally a downstream consequence of a lower back injury, apart from in the pregnant lady. So focus on rehabilitating the lumbar spine, focusing on stabilizing the lower back, because by the way, when you stabilize the lower back, you're also stabilizing the SIJs. When you learn to control the lower back and protect the lower back, you're also doing exactly the same for the SIJs, because you can't differentiate between these two areas. You stabilize the whole lot, which includes the SIJs. So very, very important that we understand. You don't need to. Are all things possible for jumping running? We did that one. Raphael has said, what is your opinion on running and jogging with a disc bulge? What should I think of? I think the big thing, Raphael, is focus on doing your rehab work. Focus on getting strong and healthy again. Focus on building objective load tolerance. Once you've built objective load tolerance here to a significant level, not messing around with 10, 15 or 20 kilos only, but actually doing more. You're happy, you could go into the gym or pick up your weights at home and do 5 sets of 10 on 30, 40 kilos, 25, 30, 40 kilos, something like that. Then get into running. And how you do running is exactly the same. We typically say set some reps and doing it inside the house. Sorry, on the treadmill, not outside around your town. Because what will happen is you're running along, like from personal experience, you're running along, blah, 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 and then like a car pulls out and all of a sudden you stop suddenly, right? And that jars you back up. That's nothing to do with running. That's just bad luck, right? And that's annoying. Whereas if you're on the treadmill, you've got a controlled environment. Less likely of those unnecessary things from catching you out and tripping you up, literally and figuratively speaking. And so you could do like sets and reps of like, so you start with something ridiculously little. That's what we do in the program, right? We start with phase 2 with a silly little weight. We say, tongue in cheek, hold a pack of mints and do your squat with a pack of mints, right? Anyone who can do that, hold your phone, whatever it is, right? So the same thing for the running. Start with like 10 kilometers an hour, running at something like 3 sets of 1 minute on, 1 minute off, right? And then just go home. No problem. Okay, then you build up sets and so on and so forth. That's the kind of way we do that. But if you're in the program, guys, these are the kind of things we help you guys with at the appropriate time, of course. I have good progress in 3 months since the injury, but mentally I feel fragile. The mental component is significantly helped by having significant objective evidence. So if you know that you couldn't pick up that 36 kilo, 80 pound kettlebell 3 months ago, and now you can, you feel better, right? You build confidence. And the further you go on, the more you have a little team of support, of supporting evidence to prove that you've built resilience objectively. Whereas if you're doing other silly exercises and you feel better, you're like, how do I know how strong I am? The idea is that you expose your spine to the most amount of strain inside the workout environment. So daily life is effortless. And when you're doing that, you really feel that confidence come through. Very important. In impact sports, like I do jiu-jitsu. My neck is most likely feeling funny because of jiu-jitsu this week, right? I was on the decompression table earlier. Some of you guys on TikTok might have seen my ears looking all funny on there. It looked quite peculiar. I do jiu-jitsu. There is a risk of doing that, right? My back is not an issue in that. My neck is not an issue in that. It's bad luck, right? I could hurt my arm, I could hurt my elbow, hurt my shoulder. You get to a point where if you want to do certain sports, all things have risk, right? There's a risk of crossing the road, but it's not going to be the vulnerability of your back that's the problem, right? And if you did, you can re-injure yourself. Like if you broke an arm and you broke an arm again next year, you wouldn't be like, oh gosh, but with the back we do. We don't need to, right? If you've done appropriate rehab, you are resilient enough. That does not mean you are bulletproof. Something to bear in mind. So like we had a question about could I go like paragliding? It's like if you're going paragliding, you're already dicing with the risk of death and falling out of the sky. Your back doesn't need to be the concern. So it's like that's an extreme example, but hopefully that makes sense. Elton has said this is very informal. Thank you. Awesome. Oh, I'm glad it was helpful. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully it has been helpful for you guys. And again, any of you guys need any more help, you know where to go. And maybe see you tomorrow, guys, on the live.